record this. We'll also have it, we'll have this recording available for ACE members. And the goal really today is to provide everybody in ACE sort of an outline of what we went through in strategic planning. There's 4 kind of sections to this PowerPoint, so I'll get going and then I'll stop at each section. So if anybody wants to unmute and ask some questions, we can do that, and then there will be time at the end as well. So welcome to everybody from ACE. We're so happy to have all of you online. For those of you on the West Coast, good morning, and for those in the Midwest and the East Coast, good afternoon. We're here just to kind of go through sort of a short presentation about some of the things that the group of leadership that worked on strategic planning has developed as sort of our next steps in really moving ACE forward in 2019. And this was done in 2018. So we really have some of these things, as you'll see today, as we talk about them, have already sort of been started and implemented. So I'm going to start with just a little overview. The strategic plan for ACE is done every 3 years, 2018, of course, being the year that it was scheduled. It's really directed by a group of leadership, including the ACE president and some of the executive members. And the goal really is to talk about, sort of take that step back and talk about the umbrella planning for long-range success of the organization. As we worked on strategic planning, and certainly because our staff here at Celtic was kind of new, we did a little background kind of review. We talked a little bit about some of the things that have been done in the past that were successful or not successful, and did some of that. And then we really came to 4 areas that we believe are probably the most critical to focus on for ACE moving forward from this strategic plan. And that was the ACE brand, the issue, and certainly most critical issue of declining membership in the organization and what kind of revitalization we can do to get the organization sort of back on its feet, opportunities to create and connect with new members, and then finance being a big part of our discussion for strategic planning. The goals then of at the end of the day, what are the goals that we want to achieve sort of in that next 3-year period for some of the initiatives that we're talking about in this strategic plan? We really wanted to clarify the mission and purpose of the organization and be able to articulate that well into the professional community. We looked at some of the competitor associations and what that means to ACE. If you are someone that maybe is deciding where you want to belong and you're looking at us and some of the competition, where do we fit in and how do we really sort of distinguish ourselves in that decision-making moment? We want to talk a little bit then about engaging the current ACE members. One of our issues we know is declining membership. How do we retain those members? How do we become of value to our members to make sure that when they pay their dues, they do it willingly and with all certainty that they are getting a lot out of their membership as being part of ACE. Education, we know, was really important, so we talked about really elevating those educational events and how do we make them more meaningful. We talked about just simply increasing membership. What are our opportunities for some maybe campaigns to students, young professionals, re-engaging or engaging some of those directors and deans that have either fallen by the wayside or have not really engaged with ACE in the past. Students and young professionals, we talked a lot about the future and what does that mean. When you talk long-range planning, you want to make sure that as we work with these students and they go out into their careers, that we're engaging them and we're keeping them connected to the organization as they become young professionals and then work towards, really coming to light in their careers. We also talked about expanding membership to industry and other ag communication audiences, and we talked about what are those opportunities. And lastly, and maybe, shouldn't be last, but it's a very, very important element of the long-range success of the organization was how do we balance this budget? How do we make sure that the programs and the decisions we're making, that we're making decisions that are relevant to the organization as a whole, that we're not spending money on things or time on things that perhaps aren't really relevant to the membership, and how do we make sure that our focus is always toward using the money in the most productive and relevant way for members. So those were the goals. And so I'm going to go kind of through each one of those 4 sections that we talked about. The first one here is really the ACE brand. We talked a lot about, I'm going to go just back up a page for just a second, because I want everybody just, that is the, what I'll call now the old logo and the old tagline. And we talked a lot about this old tagline, and we talked a lot about, does this distinguish who you are? If somebody doesn't know anything about ACE, do they understand who you are and why they would want to get involved? And we decided this really wasn't the best tagline to distinguish us. So we worked a little bit on the different taglines, and the tagline that was decided was driven by science, communicating for change. And we talked a lot about taking the brand and kind of focusing on agriculture or focusing on natural and life sciences, and how could we get all that information in there, and decided we really needed to focus on this tagline to distinguish ourselves, and then utilize some of those areas of expertise, I'll call them, agriculture and natural sciences, and life and human sciences, or natural resources, I'm sorry, and life and human sciences, and focus maybe on some of the way that we lay out our website and lay out some of the other materials that we do to make sure that we're connecting with those different industries and audiences. So this is our new tagline. We talked a lot about the mission and making sure that the mission was very clear. So the mission has been kind of updated to ACE members work together to drive excellence in communicating trusted research-based agricultural information to improve lives around the world. And we did focus on agriculture here, and then expanded that in what we're calling our elevator speech to make sure that we were very well-rounded with all of those different industries. So I'll just read this real quickly. ACE is an international association of communicators, educators, and information technologists who focus on communicating research-based information. The organization offers professional development and networking for individuals who extend knowledge about agriculture, natural resources, and life and human sciences. Okay? And these are sort of important things that I think we will kind of stitch into some of the introduction to our annual conference and some of those things to make sure that our members understand sort of the distinction of our purpose. What we decided was the 3 really important differentiators about ACE was that we're centered on these land-grant professionals, even though it's not an exclusive to our membership. We're focused on sharing knowledge around the world, and this science-based sort of source of agricultural information and education in these different industries was really a big part of what we talked about. So those are sort of some of the backgrounds on why we did what we did. The updated logo looks like this. And so I'm going to stop there and ask if anyone has any questions about membership, or about the brand, I'm sorry, about the brand. Everybody good? Okay, we'll move to the next section then. So probably the majority of our time was really spent on the declining membership of ACE and what's happening there and what's happening with renewals and some of those, and how do we connect with membership in a more meaningful way. There had been a survey done with the members, and so in each one of these slides, we sort of talked about what the members said to us and how we were going to respond to that. So our members requested an increase in communication. So that's a really telltale, probably the most important thing that came out of that survey was that you are not communicating enough. And I think in today's world, that's almost, you know, a real opportunity for us, because so many people are like, oh, I'm sick of getting emails from you, or I'm sick of getting so much information. Your membership does not feel that way. So we really talked about what kinds of strategies and what kinds of things can we do to make sure that we're creating this connection, that we're providing good and valuable information, but that we're connecting with our current members. So we looked at our social connections and we really decided to differentiate our messages. So now on Facebook, we're going to be focusing on the culture and the people of ACE and what people are doing, and kind of make our Facebook a little bit more of sort of that people focus. And on the LinkedIn side, we're going to focus on some of this expert and research-based content and drive some of that more industry-driven content to our connections on LinkedIn and Facebook. And one of the things that we want to do is really start connecting with our members and making sure that they're following us and that they're involved in that. So if you know people that are, you know, LinkedIn with you and you share posts, so, you know, that's a perfect thing for anyone on this call. If you see us posting something and you share that to your groups and your LinkedIn and on your Facebook, you'll also be sharing that to relevant colleagues and probably members as well, to make sure that they're connected to us from an ACE standpoint of getting information. One of the other things we're going to do is a monthly e-news or email to members, and we're to give them updates on what's going on and kind of keep them in the know. I think that's going to be a really important part of what we do, to see that the office here and that the leadership and the board, the committees are making progress and doing things. It's not just the annual meeting, it's sort of all year long. Learning communities, we're going to be challenging our learning communities to provide more contributions, to really provide some good content for our members, whether that be through articles that can be shared in social or on our e-news. We also know that they have webinars and some things like that where they're sharing sort of relevant topics within that learning community. And we want to make sure that there's a really good ongoing push for those learning communities. And lastly, we did kind of something on the website. We changed the look and the cover of the website. I'm just going to hit an escape here and share my screen because I want to, I want everybody sort of to see the cover of the website. We really changed out the front cover of the web of our template to include sort of these areas of focus. So you'll start to see this I think it will scroll. I'm hoping because yeah, there we go. So it scrolls through some photographs of agriculture, natural resources, and life and human sciences. We're going to be putting up a couple other photos onto this so that there's a little bit more of a slideshow. But again, we want people that kind of come to our website to really be focused on, you know, what's going on as an organization. We've also included the latest news for Jack here, but also some information. This will be a little bit of a news section right here. Right now, obviously, the ACE conference is up there, but we'll be able to put some ACE information there. And then, of course, the Welcome to ACE includes sort of our top 8 benefits of membership, and we really want to, you know, draw people in to join now on the website. We've also added a donation area here where we are asking people to donate to the organization to really help support members in their efforts to extend their knowledge, and we'll be using some of that money for both the organization and for the conference and helping people get to the conference. Okay, I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint here. One of the things we also know is that the conference is really your most important benefit, even though we know that every member doesn't attend the conference. For those that do, they're very engaged, they really like the conference. So we really want to make sure that the committee and the group that's working on the program for the annual conferences is coming up with that engaging program to make sure that it is high quality and the attendees really feel the value of coming. We're going to explore some paid speakers, and that's going to be, you know, again, a budget issue, but we're focusing on, you know, sort of where we can cut back on some budget things and where we can maybe add some money to get some paid speakers in that might generate some real push and excitement for the conference. And then increasing sponsors and really including registration in those sponsor packets so that we get some of those industry communicators from the industry side coming to the event as well. Okay. We also really talked a lot about some of the current benefits, and that's where we kind of got to that top 8 benefits that are on the front page of the homepage. We know that people want to share some things in their state. We've talked a little bit about having sort of these local share programs and that being sort of a long-range goal. This monthly ACE News e-blast will be a big part of sort of the benefits. And one of the things that we thought was an underutilized benefit was really the connection between ACE and JAC. And we felt like it was sort of like, does anybody reading JAC really know that this is the publication for the ACE Association? So we decided to really do a couple things. We're going to talk about JAC being brought to you by ACE. We're adding a president's column, which Elizabeth is working on already for the JAC issues. JAC will remain free to members, but not to non-members. They would have to provide an email to the office here in order to get JAC. We're not going to charge them immediately, but we're going to try to say, hey, if you're coming to our website to take a look at our magazine, you should probably be a member in ACE. So they're going to have to provide their email to be able to go and look at JAC through our website. The other thing that we are going to add is a fee for non-members to publish in JAC. If you want to publish an article, if you want to put something into our magazine, we feel strongly that you either need to pay to do that or you need to be part of our organization and you need to be as a full-fledged member of the organization to publish for free. Okay. And again, learning communities, very, very important part of the organization. We felt that they were a little bit underutilized. So we're working on a learning community calendar of events. We're trying to add more posts from our learning communities to the expert content that goes out on the ACE social accounts. And then we're working on a webinar schedule to make sure that those learning communities are really connecting and networking our members with relevant topics to that particular learning community group. All right. So I'll stop there. Any questions on some of that declining membership and revitalization? Nothing? This is an easy group. Okay. The next section that we focused on for strategic planning then was new members. So we know that membership has been in a decline and we need to really engage current, but then we also need to define some new opportunities. So we talked a lot about sort of the deans and directors of some of the departments and how they really used to be an integral part of ACE. We want to do a campaign to get those people back or to get them engaged if they never have been. We want to do some special invitations to government and other important professionals that might add to our membership. So Elizabeth and the leadership team are looking at who we might invite to become members and then sending some letters out to those sort of really relevant organizations, maybe in government or in the ag community, to get those people to really be part of the organization. We want to look at expanding to industry members, both as individuals and, of course, in their sponsorship efforts, and be able to utilize some of those industry connections as ways to really make sure that we're kind of expanding our horizons in some of those discussions and people that would be part of ACE. Campaigns to students and young professionals are going to be really important. I talked a little bit about that earlier, about how we feel it's so important for the future of the organization to make sure that we're connecting with those people, those kids or young professionals as they're really at the beginning of their career. And then one of the things that we want to talk about or have talked about here at the office is when we get new members, how do we onboard them? How do we make sure somebody calls and welcomes them? What comes from the office once they've paid their membership? And how do we ensure that they really understand what a learning community is or understand how they can get on a webinar, how they can utilize our website, how to connect with us on the social media side? So Celtic here will be working on sort of an onboarding kind of, it's going to be a very simple, but maybe like a six or seven step process of what happens when we get a new member and how do we make sure that they are really comfortable in sort of connecting with their colleagues in ACE immediately. one of the things that we need to make sure is that we really use our current members to maintain, not only maintain retention, but they're really our biggest advocates out in the field as well. So we talked about a couple of programs for ACE to do that, one being more volunteer recognition. The organization has a tremendous group of volunteers committed to working really day to day on different programs and different, assignments to make sure the association is strong. How do we network better at the conference? That's one thing we've talked a little bit about in the conference program planning. One thing we are going to do is have a board and new member reception. What we want to do is connect those new members to leadership right away. So they sort of feel confident that, hey, here's who's running this organization. These are really strong people. I know who they are. I feel a connection sort of right away at the conference. And again, we're only going to be hitting those people that attend the conference, but that is, I think, an important face-to-face opportunity. And then directors and deans, we talked about having, once we're successful in sort of integrating some of those people into the association, how do we get them to connect with each other? They're a little bit different in sort of some of the things that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. So could we have sort of councils to allow them to network with each other and really provide opportunities for them to discuss sort of that management level of running a department at maybe a university or that kind of thing. So again, giving these directors and deans an opportunity to net with each other, maybe speak at the conference, those kinds of things to really get them engaged as well. So any questions on that section? Anything? Okay. I'll move to our last section then, and that's finance. We talked a lot about the budget and balancing the budget for ACE and what's happening with sort of the organization. So we did discuss a dues increase in 2019. We're actually working with the retiree section and re-examining sort of how we handle retiree and life member dues and their status and what that means. And how do they kind of work with us? One of the things, sort of the first step in all of this, is really to take the ACE database and clean it up. That's something that we're working really hard. I think we should have that accomplished in first quarter of 2019. There's been a lot of communication with people who are lapsed in their dues, that they will be turned off, their benefits will be gone. I think that's kind of a new phenomena. So we're trying to be very careful and considerate to make sure they have every opportunity to, pay their renewals and stay within the organization. We don't want to lose one. But we also can't be providing benefits to members that aren't paying their dues and renewing when it's their time to renew. We're exploring new ways to involve the retirees. I think that's really important. We've looked at sponsorship packages, and we're doing some new sponsorships opportunities for the upcoming conference. And then again, we talked a little bit about this. A non-member who wants to attend a webinar or publish in JAC would have to pay fees to do that. So that would no longer just be open to anybody who wanted to. And here's some things that we're sort of stopping as an organization. The state reps is something that really has not been active, or we decided it's a lot of energy that really, for something that maybe hasn't really provided what we thought it was going to provide. We thought it would be better to do some local sharing rather than have a state rep and assign them and put them all up on the website and then really have nothing happening within those local communities. And then the retiree expense budget, there was some expense budget there that we are and have worked with, obviously, our leadership on removing the expense budget for that. And then the organization was doing fundraising, but almost all of the fundraising was on a restricted basis. And what we mean by that is we're going to raise funds to, I'm just going to make something up, to put a new banner up on the stage at the conference. So that fundraising would be done, and it would be for that one and only thing only. So what our recommendation is when you fundraise for a 501c3, you really fundraise for the organization as a whole, and you obviously have some mission for those fundraising dollars. But it needs to be a leadership decision as to where those dollars go each year and what kinds of programs we're able to do based on what's best for the organization, rather than restricting those funds to one thing or another thing. One of the issues that we looked at is that there were some restricted funds for ACE that really couldn't be used for anything else, but the participation by the members wasn't there, so the funds weren't really being used. So again, that's another discussion that we had with the leadership and the board about those fundraising and restricting those. So we won't be doing restricted fundraising in the next 3 years. So any questions about the budget side?
Yeah, this is Beth Forbes.
Yeah.
Hi, I wanted to ask, one of the concerns that some members had was about the opportunity to pay due various times throughout the year. So have we kind of refined a process so that they can join throughout the year rather than at specific times like conference and December?
Well, so that's an interesting thing. That there's been a couple of different things that have been happening, and we are. So let me answer the question first. Yes, a person actually, like any organization, you put in your dues for a year, and if you put them in March 1st, your next renewal is March 1st, the next year. So that has sort of been an issue with ACE in that that has not been followed. So that's how I'll put that, where we could see members that maybe their renewal was supposed to be November and they really didn't renew until the following June, but they were never cut off. And so there's all this very weird kind of renewal going on, Beth. So we're hoping to, and again, it's a little bit of just culturally. There were people, well, I just don't send in my dues until the annual meeting, but you can't do that if your dues are due in January and the annual meeting isn't until summer. So we're talking a little bit about that and how to do that. But at this particular moment, there is a grace period, and once they have missed their renewal, they will be shut down as a member. Okay? Did I answer that well enough, Beth?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I just know that was one of the concerns was just having the ability to be a member at different times as opposed to December, which is a very costly time for a lot of people.
I got it, yes. So if they wanted to change their renewal date, we could certainly do that if that's the question. I think what happened with a lot of people is that nothing ever happened when they didn't renew. So the renewal dates, if we look at records of members, they might have had a renewal date of, they might have joined in October, but then in the following October, they didn't pay. Well, then they wanted to go to the conference. So then they would pay the following June. Well, now when is their renewal? Is it October or is it the following June? So there's a few kind of sticky wickets, I'll call them, in how to handle some of those. And we want to be really careful. We don't want to make anybody mad. We don't want to turn anybody away. We want our members engaged. But we also can't just leave them in the membership pool and give them all the member benefits if they're not paying their dues. So it's an interesting balance, and we're working, really hard to make sure that we sort of kind of walk before we run, but that we get everybody sort of in a good place by mid-2019. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. So kind of lastly is, I always say it's all great to look at these slides, but how are we going to get all of this done? So we talked a lot with the leadership and the board about, there's a lot of different kind of tactical elements in here. There's a lot of focuses that are really, I think, critical to the health of the organization. So what we decided to do is, and to Elizabeth's leadership, she really wanted to pull together a quality org chart of what everybody's responsibilities are from a leadership of the organization. And then what we decided to do is to really take a look at some of these goals and assign specific goals to our leadership. So not only are they maybe running the learning community, but their job is to make sure that the leadership community is actually doing a content calendar and having learning community regular meetings, regular discussion, posting, and having sort of some maybe a webinar or something, depending upon what their goals are. From Celtic standpoint, we have been working on sort of a content calendar that kind of goes across all communications. When are we going to be talking to the members about this or that or the other thing? And to make sure that it goes out in the e-news, that the board is talking about it, that it's on social, that the learning communities, maybe if that's a particular area that they're involved in, that they're helping us with that. So that there's sort of a communication plan throughout the year, and we're all sort of focused on some specific topics at the same time. We needed to create some special campaigns to some of these new audiences, and we're working on that. And then conference planning, we've added a board advisor to that group just to really help elevate that program and sort of be in the know, or the eyes and the ears for the board as some of that planning is taking place. So this, I know this is probably really small, and anybody who wants it, I can send it out in a PDF, but this is, at the end of the day, this is what the org chart looked like. So again, every one of our board of directors has a specific goal, and I'm just going to focus on those right now, beyond obviously what they're doing. But so for Elizabeth, she's really the one that's doing that government and industry invitation and connection. Suzanne Steele is really focusing on a campaign to the deans and the administrators to really see if we can engage that group in membership. Doug has been really focusing on the CNA Awards, and we've talked about maybe doing some review of the CNA Awards after this year and trying to work on those. That's an important part of our fiscal health because we do, that is a good revenue source for the organization. Jennifer has been focused on generating new sponsorships. And then sort of if you go across the board of directors, Becky is working, and I think has been contacting a lot of our lapsed members and trying to re-engage with some of those lapsed members and some of those lapsed communication department directors. Victor is working on sort of the high quality programs. Again, he and Craig are doing the annual conference, and that's really where we talk about that program being, you know, when they take a look at who's speaking and what's coming up, it's sort of the I can't miss this kind of thing. Toby is working on engagement from a standpoint of the communication side of things, and working strongly with our office here on what kind of e-news and what kind of things we're sending out to the membership. We're also working on a member onboarding program, as I mentioned, so that falls under Toby as well. Dennis and Matt are really, their goal is to increase membership by 100 members. And again, almost everybody on this is going to be involved in sort of that increase in membership, but that's sort of their, you know, benchmark, if you will. Lori then is really working with the learning communities and creating these topics and topic experts. Lori Baker, they're promoting the connection to Jack. And again, we talked a little bit about, you know, really utilizing Jack and how important it is for our members. Linda is the one who's really leading the charge on retirees and focusing on maybe getting the retirees a little more involved, and also having those retirees be part of that sort of maybe giving back program. And she's very involved in that. And then Donna, of course, is our development officer. She's really working on some of those unrestricted funds. And Joanne is handling sort of archiving and some of the data for the organization. So this is sort of the concept of what we are working on for from a strategic level for the next 3 years. Questions? That's the end of the presentation. Anyone? Elizabeth, do you want to maybe?
Well, I wanted to first just emphasize who the committee was, the planning, the strategic planning team, and that included me, of course, and Suzanne as the past president, and Doug as president-elect, and Jennifer as vice president, who had just had a baby at that point, and so she wasn't able to participate as fully as you might imagine. And then we also included Mary Worth, who was the outgoing Learning Communities Director, and Lori Greiner, who was the new Learning Communities Director, because we really wanted to have that representation from the people who are most plugged in with the membership through the learning communities. And then that it also included our executive director, Deb, and Marlene, who, as the CEO of Celtic, also has great strategic planning ability, and so she led us through the strategic planning process. But this was, in my view, a very inclusive group, and we really did talk through a lot of these issues in a lot of detail. And so I want to thank all of them for their participation and investment, and all of the wisdom that they shared, and the commitment to the process in helping us get this plan put together.
Yeah, I would agree. So are there any other questions, comments? And if not,
Brian has asked a question in the chat box about how many international members do we have. And we can look in the database, Brian, to see, but I think we just have a few members still in Canada. We did talk about the former membership that we used to have at the different research institutes that are around the globe, and we don't seem to have as many. Maybe there aren't as many communicators there, or there maybe aren't as many in the United States who would be interested in ACE membership. But that is a potential for growth if those communicators are still out there. So I don't know if that helps, Brian, or not. Thank you. And if you haven't looked in the chat box, there were a few questions and comments there too. If you're on the call and want to see what some of the chat discussion was going on, we'll be saving that as well.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. This is Beth Stever at Michigan State. And when it comes to membership and membership recruiting, I agree with you guys that there are tons of opportunities through our learning communities, but I feel like we struggle a little bit every year to get great leadership in all of the learning communities. Has there been any discussion about maybe there being fewer, more robust learning communities?
We share your concern about the difficulty in getting leadership for the learning communities. That's been something that we have discussed, and we have considered the possibility of consolidating some, and we know that some of the learning communities themselves have seen kind of commonalities with other groups and have consolidated and requested to be merged, like the academic programs and the research communities merged. The writing and media relations communities merged. So we have done some of that consolidation in the past. We also are looking at the requirements for the learning community leaders and trying to simplify those to really kind of make them make sense, to be strategic and not too much busy work that's not necessary, so that it's not as much of a burden to be a leader for a learning community. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. If you have ideas specifically, Beth, that you would like to suggest, we would welcome, the board would welcome any input that you'd like to offer.
Sure. The only thing that immediately comes to mind is I do wonder if for learning communities, if a 3-year rolling responsibilities is too much, and maybe pulling that back a little bit. The other thing I just want to throw out there, that as you look at recruiting with government agencies and so forth, here in Michigan, we recruited the communicator for our state vet's office who works with the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And I'll tell you, if you need a testimonial, she has great things to say about how it has helped her advance her career and the kinds of connections that she's made through ACE over time. So there's a really good success story there.
That's fantastic, Beth. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great to hear.
And Beth, one of the things that we're going to be doing is highlighting with some testimonials some of our members. Would you mind sending her name and information? You can send it to Elizabeth. She can forward it to me if you don't have my email or Deb's email. but that would be fantastic because we are working toward doing some testimonials, and that would be an interesting sort of different kind of member that I think would be great for that testimonial program.
Yep, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Okay.
Say thank you for this opportunity to hear your thoughts and to.
Great. Thank you all so much for participating. If you think of a question later, you can certainly email Elizabeth. You can email me or Deb. We'll get back to you. Or if you have a great brainstorm idea, we love to hear those. That's always good. But I really appreciate everybody for attending today. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.